Good morning, everyone. Ari is such a treasure, is he not? Amazing, amazing. So the themes so far this morning to me have stood out around culture, the environment we build, how we treat people, what happens in a room when we leave the room with our teams and our people. And I was blessed to be able to talk about that last year here at the Welcome Conference. So I'm Kat Cole. I'm the president and COO of one of the fastest growing nutrition companies in the world called Athletic Greens, or AG. Woo! Did you have your AG one this morning? I hope so. If not, DM me. I know people. I can get you some. But I have spent a lifetime in this industry. I started out as a hostess at Hooters and then became a waitress and then started opening franchises around the world at the age of 19 and then became an executive at the company during its peak growth era when we were launching airlines and casinos and grocery product before it was cool and expanding around the world. And then I left to become president of Cinnabon and turn it around in the heart of the Great Recession, and then grow that portfolio of global brands with focus brands and build a CPG and e-commerce division, and then navigate third-party delivery disruption, and then the pandemic, and then found myself here last year with many of you talking about making the most of our situation, sharing principles and frameworks like monthly check-ins with the 6 questions I ask my team and even my husband, my most important relationships every month. 3 questions to ask team members, 1 thing to stop doing, 1 thing to start doing, what's 1 thing you do differently if you were me to make the business better. And the whole concept is just no matter what the situation, stay close to the action. And the action is the transaction. And the people who are driving the transaction are our frontline workers. And this industry gives us the opportunity and demands that of our leadership. It demands grit. It demands resilience. It demands making the most of our situation. If we choose to be in it, this is what we do to make the most of it. And in fact, it's this industry that brought me to meet our next speaker, who I get to interview, Angela Duckworth, who is the author of a phenomenal book that embodies this industry strength, Grit, the author of an upcoming book around the next step beyond that of making your situation your ally. She is a professor at UPenn and Wharton, and I want to get this piece right. You'll see it in the bios, but I want to honor her incredible experience. Faculty co-director of the Penn-Wharton Behavior Change for Good initiative, and faculty co-director of the Wharton People Analytics, a 2013 MacArthur Fellow. She has advised the US Department of Education, the World Bank, the NBA, NFL teams, Fortune 500 CEOs, completed her undergrad degree in advanced studies of neurobiology at Harvard, her MSc with distinction in neuroscience at Oxford University, and her PhD in psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also the co-founder of, yes, right? She's also the co-founder of CharacterLab, a nonprofit that advances scientific insights to help kids thrive. And speaking of kids thriving, I met her amazing daughter last night at the dinner, who is following in the family's footsteps of science and academia, but is also launching supper clubs and pop-ups and leaning into a modern version of hospitality on her campus. So our worlds continue to collide. And with that, I would love you to give a warm welcome to Angela Duckworth to come up. All right, I've got a few questions written down. Who knows, will this show go in the next 20 minutes?
I've been taking notes this morning. Is everyone taking notes? Anyway, I
so many notes, so good. A couple tears, lots of notes, such is the way of the Welcome Conference. All right, first, I got to know you through your first book, Grit.
Yes.
We were at the Women's Food Service Forum Conference. You were the keynote speaker for the CEO Forum. I was in the audience. We ended up talking at a table, and the discussion was so robust, you ended up interviewing my mom.
Yes, Joe.
Because of our story of leaving my father when I was 9 and her feeding us on a food budget of $10 a week for 3 years. And she was one of the many, many examples of grit. For those who haven't read Grit, and I recommend that you do, could you give us a primer on grit, your research, what you found, and what might be relevant based on what you're hearing and seeing with this audience?
So, you know, when Ari said that, you know, people who really change the world, they don't do it in 5 minutes. This is not a flirtation. It's not a hookup. It's what you do, I think he said all fucking day. Did
All
he
fucking
not?
day.
Yeah, something
AFD,
like that.
new acronym, AFD.
But really they do it consistently over not weeks, not months, years, decades, and in some cases a lifetime. That's what grit is. So what's the difference between somebody who's passionate for a day, hardworking for 3 days, and somebody who has grit really is the consistency over time. So I study people like Kat, which is how I wrote you into the purpose chapter, appropriate for this morning's talks. I study people like Will. I study people like Dominique, who will be on next. I mean, I study superachievers, and the discovery from the scientific research over 2 decades about superachievers is that it's not just, and maybe not so much as we think, talent. A kind of like, oh, things come easily to them, they learn faster than everyone else. So much of excellence, of equity, of changing the world is from doing that thing that you love consistently for an incredibly long time. And grit, passion and perseverance for long-term goals, the correlation between grit and any measure of talent is about 0. And we've all seen it. People who are like, oh my gosh, you're so smart, you're so gifted, but where were you on Monday? When you really needed to show up again. And again and again. So you don't have to buy grit. That's a primer on what it is and why I was so interested in it, because I think we do get distracted by talent. It seems to be a complete explanation for who changes the world, and I think it is not.
So later today, the audience is going to hear from a speaker who Ari just referenced, who was incarcerated, who's been on his own journey, and he has this powerful message of, in an industry, like many, that are so hard-pressed to find talent and workers and meet staffing requirements, now more than ever, we need to be open to people of all different walks of lives and different experiences at all levels, not just the most entry-level job in the restaurant, but corporate, management. There's capability that can be found everywhere. And I remember a section in your book, and I remember hearing interviews with you where people were saying, but how do you interview for grit? How do you find it? How do you build it? Could you share some of the tips if someone's a manager and they just want to get good at spotting it before they really know someone? What are some of those tips?
So the idea that you want to hire for grit, I think, is really an important one. And I'm gonna answer Kat's question, because she asked a question, and I should answer it. But
or take it wherever you want.
I'm gonna say something at the end of my answer that also talks about the limitations of being able to look somebody in the eye and just see that they have it. So let me answer the question first. I think the best indicator that somebody has passion and perseverance for long-term goals is that they have done something in their lives. Might look very different, might be in a completely different context, but they have done something that took years of effort and commitment and struggle, and that they were able to make some measure of objective progress. And when you're talking about hiring somebody on the younger side, so maybe they're maybe you're their first job, God forbid, but yes, maybe they're your first job, maybe, the second, then you really do have to look for this pattern. And, did they play a musical instrument in that way? Did they do a sport? Were they, like my husband, working for Domino's Pizza for multiple years in high school, but doing really, really good work there, and having some objective indicator of progress. So I think that is quite literally the single best way that I know of looking for grit. And when I code resumes, looking for multi-year commitments with evidence of progress, I find that it predicts all the same outcomes as other measures that are fakeable, like questionnaires. And what the opposite of this looks like is somebody who doesn't have any evidence of having been able to commit in that way for a period of time. So that's the answer to Kat's question. So I answered Kat's question. But Kat generously mentioned that I'm working on another book, and she asked me what the title was, and I was like, I don't know, but I think I'll call it Easier: Change Your Situation, Change Yourself. And the reason I say that it's difficult to look somebody in the eye and even look at their resume and see the evidence of grit with 20/20 vision, is that I think sometimes, and I think many of our speakers today, and maybe many of you, would say there was a time in my life where if you looked at me, you wouldn't see anything special unless you were really looking. And I think many of us, had a time in our lives where people would not say, oh, this person's going to be amazing. In fact, they might have said the opposite. So there are limitations, I think, of looking at what someone has done in their past to predict what they will do in the future. And that's, where my head is right now.
So as we move beyond grit to this concept of easier, your next book highlights the concept that achieving your goals is easier if you make your situation your ally. Can you talk more about the research and core concepts of making your situation your ally? Because they're certainly in this industry, whether it's the fryers going down or ghosting of employees, which is not a decreasing epidemic in the industry. So many things to navigate on a shift-to-shift basis, but also corporate, the real estate challenges, demand dynamics, profitability. I would love to hear more about where you're taking this situation as your ally concept.
So last night I was talking to my daughter Lucy, who is here, and for those of you who know Philly, she worked for Mark Vetri. Before it was legal, she was in 8th grade, and then when it was legal, he's like, I'll start paying her. So she started washing dishes, as many people in this room have. And so I was talking to Lucy about what I was going to talk about today, and I was like, oh, maybe I should, talk about Will and his dad Frank, or maybe I should talk about Kat and Joe, because the idea that I wanted to bring to you today was one very special thing in your circumstances that I think makes a hell of a difference, and that's guardian angels. The people in your life who have changed your life. And Lucy said to me, well, they know about a lot of these food stories. Why don't you tell them about Cody Coleman? And so that's what I'm going to do. So Cody Coleman, I met him. He was in his final year at MIT, graduating with a 4.9 out of 5.0, double degree in computer science and engineering. But Cody grew up actually in chaos and poverty. He was actually born in prison. We're not entirely sure how that was physically possible, but he was conceived and born in prison, never met his father. When I met him, he was already at this kind of unbelievable sort of, wait, you're graduating from MIT, like what? And so when I wrote about Cody in the book, I met with him actually a few months after I'd finished the last edit of the book, but before it hit the book stands. And we're in Chicago in a restaurant where great things happen. And it was literally on the back of a napkin. And we drew an exponential curve, a curve that goes like this. And we were looking at it, we're like, that's your life. Because you don't get from prison to MIT with a near perfect GPA with a straight line. You just can't get there. You have to go like this. So what the hell, right? And we're looking at that and we're like, it doesn't make any sense. But a few years later, Cody was giving a TED Talk at Stanford, where he was getting his PhD in computer science. And the first slide he puts up is a curve like this. And he says, this is my life. And he shows another line. He was like, and this is a flat line. You just don't get here with a flat line. So something happened. And he's like, let me tell you what I think happened. So first thing that happened is that his mother was incapable of raising him. But his grandmother, who was not a perfect person by any means, she just stepped in and did her best, which was, again, by no means perfect. And then, so she was a guardian angel in his life. And then his older brother, Sean, came home. He was much older, so he was just visiting, really, for a couple of days. And they're in the car together, and Cody's in high school. And his brother, Sean, turns to him, and he says, so college? And Cody's like, yeah, like Princeton, like a joke. And his brother says, why not? And I know a lot of us have been writing down quotes, so have I. And a quote that Cody lives by is he's like, that's the day why bother became why not. because in his head it had always been like college, whatever, why bother? And then his brother Sean, his guardian angel, gave him the power of 2 words, why not? Okay, second guardian angel. Well, then Cody, starts working really hard in high school, and he attracts the attention of 2 teachers, Chantel and Norm. And now we're all family, so like Chantel and Norm are salt of the earth. And these 2 teachers see something special in this really hardworking kid, and they more or less adopt him. Right? They actually put together a little fund called the Warm Clothes Fund, because they were like, oh, MIT, Boston, it'll be really cold. They were like, we swear to you, Cody, that you'll never be hungry and you'll never be cold. And they literally all chipped in. Norm paid his cell phone bills. I mean, so these were guardian angels, right? So then he gets to MIT, where there are, by the way, plenty of guardian angels. And then he went to Stanford, and more guardian angels. And that's how you build an exponential curve. Because you don't get there like this. You get there because, oh, this person gave me that break. Oh my gosh, that opened these doors. Then I was in a completely different room, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to give you the epilogue because, Grit was published a while ago. And so time has passed. So what's Cody Coleman doing now? Well, during the pandemic, when everything was on Zoom, I got to go to his PhD dissertation defense, which I understood none of, because it was all math, and it was on AI. I know it was on AI. Beyond that, woo! And that was the day that Cody received his PhD in computer science from Stanford University. He was the first Black recipient of a PhD in computer science in the prior 20 years, and I believe the 5th in history, right? Which tells you that the world is in sore need of guardian angels. And then in the last couple of years, he's created a startup called Coactive. And if you find him on Twitter, social media, LinkedIn, I think his tagline now is Cody for President. So his exponential curve continues.
And how I think about all the opportunities in this industry that all of you in the room have to be a guardian angel, and the moments where it is so important that we be open to the nudges, the guidance, the help from others at every point in the journey. I remember Bonnie, who was my first GM at Hooters. She herself had been a Hooters girl, and I was working 3 jobs to help support my family, and I was late a lot as a result. I was racing from the mall and to try to get to the hostess shift. And then when I became a waitress, I remember she sat me down at the age of 18, and she said, look, your peers like you, your customers love you, you do a great job, but I need to know I can depend on you. And if you can't show up on time, I need to reduce your shifts. It's your choice. I'm just telling you what I need to do. But what I want for you is for you to take on more and become a trainer. And it was the first time someone treated me like an adult and like a grown-up, where it's like, this is your choice, but there are consequences and implications. And she, if anyone knows Bonnie Reinhardt, Jacksonville, Florida. Guardian angel. And she's like this very tiny person physically with a very quiet yet bold leadership. And I don't know if I was ever late again. It was rare if I was. I became a trainer. It altered the course of my life and my relationships with that company and that business. When the company was growing globally, she then had enough confidence in me to recommend me to be a part of it. So she was a guardian angel to me directly and quietly in rooms where I was not present. And I think about that for all of us, the importance, the responsibility of being a guardian angel, of embodying what Ari and those who have spoken already this morning have talked about, this idea of love and care. And Ari said something in his 6 bullets. It was about acting with imperfection, this idea of imperfection. And if you just state it and you know it and it's expected, it changes the game. I'm not expecting anyone to be perfect. I don't expect it of myself or the situation or the shift or the customer, and it leaves more space to care and be that person who sees someone, treats them with dignity, and says, like I heard in our speaker dinner last night, the founder of Southern Smoke and the person who's transformed the Houston dining scene, someone that he worked for, and I won't spoil it if he's going to share it as part of the story, made a life-changing recommendation to him. So this idea of nudges, recommendations, tough love, coaching, feedback, honesty, feel like many different forms of guardian angelship. What would be your advice if people are thinking, I want to go tomorrow and be that guardian angel for someone?
So Ari quoted the great psychologist, William James, who did say, belief creates fact, right? And one of the things that gritty people have is this tremendous belief in the future and in themselves. But where does that come from? I think that belief is implanted in us by guardian angels, by the Seans and the Chantels and the Norms of the world. So here's some practical advice about how to be a better guardian angel even than you have been so far, and it's based on science. So there was a study of kids in school. Half of them turned in their essays, remember the essays covered in red ink, topic sentence too long, blah, blah, blah. Half of the kids got their feedback with a Post-it note that said, I'm giving you feedback so you can have feedback. Kind of what we usually get, right? Even without the Post-it note, probably. The other half of the kids got their essays back, covered in red ink from their teachers, same kinds of comments. They got a different Post-it note. And the Post-it note said this: I am giving you this feedback because I have the highest expectations, and I know you can achieve them. That's all the intervention was. I'm giving you this feedback because I have the highest expectations, and I know you can achieve them. That's more or less what Bonnie did, I think, with you. I'm giving you this feedback, Kat, about being late because I have the highest expectations, and I know you can achieve them. What happened to those kids? The kids who got the control Post-it note, I'm giving this feedback because it's feedback and everyone needs to improve. Those kids, some of them revised their essays, many of them did not. The kids who got the feedback about high expectations and the belief that you can achieve them, I believe it before you believe it. Those kids revised their essays more, they got higher grades. There's actually a longitudinal follow-up that many of them actually achieved greater academic goals years later than the kids in the other group. So I believe that one of the things a guardian angel does that is the most powerful is to believe in you before you believe in yourself. To believe in you on the day that you doubt yourself. To believe in you when you feel like a loser. To believe in you when your resume, frankly, doesn't look so great. And I think that without a guardian angel, nobody's life goes like this. And for those of us who are in the privileged position to be guardian angels, I think hopefully that little bit of advice, I know you're doing it already, but maybe I think the entire day is about maybe doing that with a little more intention.
So later today you will hear from Tully on happiness and what's going on in the world and positive psychology. And it is very clear, whether it's what Ari shared, what's on his heart and his mind, and all of our lived experience, that the world's heavy. There's a lot going on. We're more aware of the heaviness because of our connectedness. And some of that is because we're quite lonely. People are more isolated, and they are not together as much. Yet in this industry, the very thing you do is bring people together. You can't outsource hospitality, and you can't outsource the experience that you provide. And so it feels important and timely, in addition to being timeless, that this industry is providing the meaning, the guardian angelship, and even a bit more of the happiness because of that connectedness. So Angela, thank you for your work, for your words, and with your perspective here. You've helped us think very differently about the opportunity that we have every day.
Do I get a hug after this?
Yes, you do.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.